Were you on that?
Yeah, that's okay.
No, go ahead. No, I like that.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. All right. So people are going to start trickling in, but I'll start off by saying something real quick. I still read the newspaper. I'm still kind of an old-fashioned guy.
So do I.
Okay, so I want to read this article. I promise will take 30 seconds, not to show off my reading skills, but how many solicit by telephone? Okay, just listen carefully. This is today's paper. A Glendale air conditioning company will pay $340,000 in fines for calling Arizona's on the federal Do Not Call registry. The Arizona Attorney General's office announced on Monday. Desert Valley Air admitted to making at least 25,000 illegal telemarketing calls from 2011 to 2015 and continued to call Arizona consumers even when the Attorney General's office was asked to stop. Some consumers who confronted Desert Valley Air about the unwanted calls said the company claimed to be exempt from the Do Not Call registry. Companies are not allowed to make sales calls to phone numbers on the registry. Under the lawsuit settlement with the Attorney General's office, the HVAC installation and maintenance company, which operates in Phoenix, Prescott, and Southern Arizona, will be banned from making any telemarketing calls for 5 years. I have zero tolerance for illegal telemarketers. Illegal telemarketing calls, which are incredibly annoying and frustrating, said the Attorney General Mark Brnovich. He said in a written statement, my office will continue to aggressively enforce telemarketers. Telemarketers caught making illegal phone calls are going to be hit with a big fine. Anyway, go on and on and on. Just be careful. That's all.
Wow.
I can't help you.
That was a bummer.
Hold on. I do want to read one last paragraph. And this is kind of maybe the loophole. You may still receive political calls, charitable calls, debt collection calls, and here's where I think the loophole is.
Surveys.
Informational calls and telephone surveys. Just be careful if you're doing it.
So here's the new script. Hey, it's Del Rounds. I'm doing a survey to see why your home didn't sell. Oh, interesting.
I like it.
Might not be a bad way to start, right? If you were to, here's another survey question, right? If you were going to rate your agent on a scale of 0 to 10, what would that number be? 8. What prevented it from being a 10? Oh, he didn't call me enough, right? That's the main thing that we hear from most of our listings. And I'm a dead to rights are yes, is not keeping in touch with my listings. I hate calling them on Mondays. It's the worst. What Bonnie's smirking, same thing. Because what do you tell them when they didn't have a showing, right? I mean, what do you tell them when the buyer doesn't come back for a second time? What do you tell them when the house down the street sold but theirs didn't, right? It's hard. It's a hard call. Usually it is. We know it's 3 things, right?
Yeah.
Right? Price, condition, and location, and price will solve all 3 of those. 2 of those. Price will solve condition and location. Right? Yeah. Did you like that, Lena? You've never heard that? Go ahead.
How many times have I told you that?
All right, so I want to welcome a couple of new agents. I see Laura's in the house. Laura Workman, stand up and introduce yourself. Hello.
Hi, I'm Laura Workman.
Laura, are you going to work?
I am, man. I'm gonna work, man.
Work man.
I like that name.
Yeah.
It's very unique.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ran into a workman. My nephew, Gabe Petratus, is in the house. Gabe, stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabe. I'll be working with these 2 a lot, but I'm down to learn from anyone in the room, so
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Welcome. Yeah, nice to have you here.
Del, he's way better looking than you are.
I know. Well, he did. I don't want to categorize him, but he did used to do some modeling. So, all right, Anthony. I didn't see Anthony here. I didn't see Patrick. I didn't see Franco Den. No. Dusty. Is Dusty in the house?
She's on Flagstaff.
She's okay. Flagstaff. Thank you. And then Dallas, Kelly Porter's daughter, just got licensed. Formerly,
She was here.
Dallas! Look at you sneaking in the back.
I know, I'm amped up on coffee. I can't sit right now.
Okay, introduce yourself. Well, everybody knows Dallas. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Dallas Griffin. I was with Fidelity National Title. It was so hard to leave, but very easy to join my mom, of course. She's had a rockin' first quarter, and she expressed to me that she needed some help, and I thought I would be the best decision. So.
Welcome. I like your car videos that you've been doing. Very fun and posting those on. Oh, maybe I keep saying it over and over again.
Yeah, I'll do more. I'll do more. That's the plan. There she is.
So,
Did you introduce Dallas yet?
Did you guys? Were you guys on walkie-talkies going? Walk in now. Walk in now.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, welcome. All right, so as you guys know, we launched a new website. Is everybody familiar with Home Junction? Been getting a lot of great reviews on that. So today, Keith is going to spend a little bit of time. We went back and did a quick survey because it's been up and running. Only about 10% of you have done and updated your profiles. Very important that you do that. Yeah, I know. I know. So I did some random checking, and so out of our 200 agents, only 20 of you have done it. Keith's going to spend some time on that today, so Home Junction. Not this Friday, May 25th at noon will be Birthday Friday. And then remember, the office is closed for Memorial Day. All right, Greg, how'd I do?
That's it.
That's it.
Nice job. Wait,
I did. Where were you?
I was smoking crack.
I've only got 5 minutes. I've only got 5 minutes, and I got 10 minutes worth of things to say. So real quickly, so two things I just want to point out. So where are you, Peggy? Just tell me real quickly what happened last week. Just tell me real quick.
What part of it?
The best part. We had an arbitration. It was just, and I'm going to get to.
Mediation.
We had a mediation, and I think we won. The lady had no case.
Oh, that part.
But when you get into a situation, and this will lead up to my introduction to our speaker. When you get into a situation, you call me. You probably heard this line. Start making notes. Keep a timeline of what happened, who said what. Because what happens is, if it ever gets to an arbitration or a mediation, it's months down the road, and we've already passed that bridge, and we have to go back and thinking what happened 6 months ago. If you think something is not kosher and it's just not going the way, and you think there might be an issue coming down the road, I don't care if it's a procuring cause or an ethics violation or whatever the case may be, just start jotting notes, right? We've talked about dates, times, and who you spoke to, anything that you can document through an email. Just put it down, because 6 months from now you're not going to remember what happened, and that helped us win a mediation.
I have to say the best part was having Sandy there with me. He was awesome.
Thank you. But this good notes, it helps. So my next point is, so Dax Watson was going to speak today, but Dax Watson blew us off because he had a better engagement. Only kidding. Listen, only kidding. Over the years, Dax has taught me so much. Not just about real estate, not about law, just about really how to deal with situations. And there's two things that he taught me. Number one, you've heard me say this before. When you get into a situation, you have to ask yourself this question. Do you want to be right, or
Do you want to win?
do you want to be smart?
Oh.
He one time said that to me so many years ago, because when Dell offered me this job a long time ago, I had no clue, and Dax was one of the first people I sought advice from. You want to be right, or you want to be smart? And I'm going to give you my example, and I'll shut up. So, bowling last night. Of all nights, I'm bowling, and I get a really nasty text from one of my tenants of property management. And Emily will tell you, we have a process. We never engage in conversation. Your air conditioner broke, I get it. We call for service, it's done. There's nothing more we can do. We call for service, and the process takes on. And this guy kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me on text, and I just gave in, and I started engaging him in a conversation, and it led to nothing good. It led to FUs, and you're an asshole, and you're the worst property manager, and I'm going to take you to the news. I'm going to get the Attorney General's office, and I was so mad at myself because I didn't let it go at service was called. There's nothing more to say. So here's my advice. Anytime you have an issue on an agent level, we need to do everything we can to solve it on an agent level. And if it can't be solved, then we're gonna do everything we can to solve it on the broker level. Because here's the danger. If we can't solve it on the broker level and it gets past us, all bets are off. AAR, mediation, arbitration, law, and that starts costing money. So we will do everything we can within our control to solve it at this level, because once Michael speaks and you hear some of his stories, anybody had to get a lawsuit, first thing you have to do is write a $10,000 check. You want to be right or you want to be smart? That's what you have to ask yourself. So having said all that, Michael Orcott is with Lipson, Nielsen, and these are the guys that really help me, which really in turn help you guys with all the legal aspects that we do. So thanks for coming out, Michael.
Thank you,
Well, thank you all. I'm here to discuss some risk reduction issues, give you some examples of some real life examples of these issues in motion. But I don't want this to be just a monologue, so please, if you've got a question about an issue I'm discussing, if you've got a question about something else in your practice, don't hesitate, raise your hand, and we can certainly discuss it. The first thing I want to talk about are scope of duties. And it's really a fine line, but a lot of the lawsuits that we're defending, they deal with an agent expanding the scope of the duties they would ordinarily owe. And the reason I say it's a fine line is because you want to provide the best possible service to your clients, and that should go without saying. The flip side to that is you may get requests from clients that go above and beyond what you ordinarily would do as a licensee, and anytime you're expanding that scope, it leads to potential exposure. I'll give you an example. This was a case that went to arbitration last fall. It was a buyer's agent in the Southeast Valley. Their client resided in Minnesota. They were buying a part-time seasonal residence. They were coming up on the close of escrow. They weren't able to attend the final walkthrough in person. They'd gone through the whole Benza process. There was a number of repairs that the seller agreed to perform. Seller said they're all done. Listing agent confirmed it. Then, of course, the buyer made the request, which was, hey, we're not going to be back in town until the 27th. Can you do the final walkthrough for me? And I think that's a fairly typical request. How that morphed, and I'll tell you in just a minute about really the inner workings of that conversation. That led to an allegation by the buyers that the agent, in fact, agreed to perform the walkthrough on their behalf and verified the repairs had been done by a licensed contractor. And it also led to something that was rather unique in that the plaintiff's agent in that case alleged kind of a unique claim that we don't typically defend. 99.9% of the lawsuit and the claims that we defend for agents, whether they be listing agent, buyer side agent, or dual agent, are what we call a tort-based claim or a negligence claim. A negligence claim is simply an allegation that the agent fell below the standard of care, that the standard of care required you to do X and you did something less than that. And perhaps one of the most, I think, important aspects of negligence claims for us as defense attorneys is that the plaintiff, even if successful, cannot recover their attorney's fees in litigation. And the reason that's particularly important is because a typical lawsuit for a plaintiff, figure it's going to cost $100,000, $150,000 to get through trial. When you talk about costs of suit, talk about attorney's fees to do depositions, discovery, motions, expert witnesses. If the plaintiff, if the alleged damages for a plaintiff, let's say they need a new roof, and even if it's a big house, maybe that's $20,000. If we can early on educate the plaintiff and their attorney that they're trying to recover $20,000 in a lawsuit that's going to cost them $150,000, and they're not going to recover any of those attorney's fees, very quickly it's going to turn into a losing proposition for the plaintiff. And it gives us a whole lot of leverage from a settlement standpoint that we can usually get in and get out, and that highlights what Sandy mentioned about being right or being smart. Even if the facts are very much in our favor, if we can settle a lawsuit for $5,000 or $2,000, whatever the case may be, very, very early on, before we start incurring the cost of defense, we typically do it. Because there are a lot of long-term issues with going to trial, and even if you win, you're going to deal with higher insurance premiums going forward. You're going to deal with being in a lawsuit for 2 to 3 years and the stress and the pressure that imposes upon you. Now, so tort-based lawsuits, each party bears their own attorney's fees, and that can be a valuable tool for us to settle a case. The other type of lawsuit, fundamental type, is a contract-based lawsuit, which is we entered into a contract. It could be verbal, it could be written, and I'm alleging that you've reached the term of it. In the case I was talking about where we went to arbitration, where the buyers were claiming that the buyer's agent agreed to perform the walkthrough on their behalf, they brought a contract-based claim. And that was a case where they were seeking about $20,000 to repair alleged defects that the seller didn't do. They've been successful in that arbitration. Not only would they have recovered the $20,000, they also recovered their attorney's fees, which through the course of arbitration were probably $40,000 or $50,000. Fortunately, we were successful in that case, and the fact pattern was a little bit different than what had been alleged by the buyer. And this goes to the agent satisfying the standard of care, I think. After the agent was sued, the agent was able to document emails going back and forth between the buyer and the agent saying, I can attend the final walkthrough, but you need to get your home inspector back out there because it needs to be your inspector that is performing the final walkthrough, or somebody else on your behalf, but that's not within the scope of my duties. So in that case, it was fine for the agent to go back out, but the agent clarified through writing that it wasn't the agent that was actually doing the final walkthrough on behalf of the buyer. With that evidence, we were successful in the arbitration. The key thing there is not accepting those additional responsibilities to the extent you do understand there is significant exposure for it. As a real estate licensee, you're not trained as a home inspector, you're not trained as a contractor. It's really not your job to verify the quality of the repairs that may be done by a seller's contractor. So it's very, very important that you clarify that issue to the buyer. If the buyer's not going to be there for a final walkthrough, the buyer needs to know they need to have qualified people to do it on their behalf. And that needs to be documented in writing. Nothing is ever going to be good enough if it's verbal in these types of lawsuits. You could have 20 verbal conversations with the buyer in that circumstance. They're going to deny all 20 of them if it goes to court. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately. The next issue I want to discuss, and this is probably one of the most difficult disclosure issues we deal with as attorneys, neighborhood condition disclosures. I'll give you an example. This was a case that generated a lot of publicity, was even on national news media. The seller of the property, this home was in South Arcadia. The seller was being harassed and had been harassed for a number of years by a mentally handicapped neighbor. She was in her 40s. She clearly had a lot of issues. In the 12 months prior to the lawsuit, she had contacted Phoenix police over 400 times, trying to get them to come out to investigate the aliens that were living on her roof. The New Times seized upon this aspect of the case, which was on a number of occasions when the husband seller came home, that neighbor would throw potatoes at him. And so the New Times had this great headline for one of their articles, which is, when do you have to disclose spuds on the spuds? So in that case, we represented the listing agents. The buyer very quickly after closing escrow said, whoa, what did I just move into? Buyer sues the seller. Seller turns around and sues the listing agent brokerage. The seller, in that case, bringing the agent in, alleged there was a verbal communication between the listing agent and the seller, that the seller asked whether disclosure had to be made of the neighbor, and the listing agent allegedly said no. Of course, first thing we do is we talk to the listing agent, and that conversation never happened. And in this case, I tend to believe that listing agent. When all bets are off when it comes to litigation, people would do or say anything to try to prevail a case, and that again highlights why verbal disclosures don't really mean a whole lot in the context of litigation. So that was a case that highlighted the difficulties of, it's pretty obvious that if you know there's mold in a house or past termites, even if they've been corrected, you've got to disclose that or make sure your seller does. When we have neighborhood conditions, the question gets a lot more complicated. And on the one hand, are we qualified as licensees to act as psychiatrists or psychologists and diagnose a neighbor and potentially invade their privacy by disclosing to the public their handicaps. On the other hand, if our seller asks us if in fact that conversation did occur, do I need to make that type of disclosure? I mean, what's your response in a situation like that?
Sandy would say disclose everything, right?
Well, just look on the first page of the SPUDS, what does it say? Big
When in
flags.
doubt.
When in doubt, when in
The
doubt.
fact that you call me for a question, or the seller asks you, it means it's a doubt.
Right.
So you would disclose it?
Yeah, and I think what you want to do, and so part of that lawsuit was obviously the privacy issues, right? If I disclose a mental condition or a handicap of a neighbor, am I invading their privacy? And who am I to make that diagnosis? I don't know that they've ever been diagnosed, and I'm not qualified to do it. You can disclose not condition, but action. So if you've got a neighbor that throws wild parties, you could disclose that, noisy neighbors. In this case, you could disclose the action, which is we have a neighbor that likes to throw potatoes at men when they return home from work. But I'll tell you, I agree with Sandy, when in doubt, disclose. In the real world, these things can get complicated because you may have a seller that says, I understand that that is going to stigmatize my property, and who wants to live next door to that? And that's where these things get even more challenging. The biggest takeaway on a particularly difficult situation like that, in my mind, is to document in writing your discussions with the seller. Make sure the seller is having discussions with legal counsel, and then talk to your broker. But a situation like that, and again, you're not going to see them very often. I mean, that was rather unique, I think. The seller should be consulting with an attorney if there's a very challenging disclosure like that. Now, obviously, the easy answer and the best answer is to make the disclosure, because you make the disclosure and there's no exposure. You can't get sued successfully if you've disclosed that issue.
Could the neighbor sue if you disclose her handicap?
Potentially she could.
Did you call it, I mean, I would just say neighbor's a nuisance.
Yeah.
And that's right, is disclosure of the action. The consequence is not the underlying condition. So I'm not disclosing that the neighbor has some sort of mental handicap or she's crazy. I'm disclosing that she has caused a nuisance or she calls the cops on us or whatever the case may be.
Right, but going with your deal, I think if you said the neighbor was handicapped, yes.
Well, even if you say that she's a nuisance, okay, first of all, the buyer's going to want to know which neighbor and what's the nuisance. What does she do? Well, she throws potatoes.
I would say go to the police reports.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you put the onus on the buyer, because that's a buyer investigation. A savvy buyer should be investigating those neighborhood conditions, should be talking to neighbors. And I can guarantee you, in this situation, if that buyer had knocked on some doors, they would have found out very, very quickly about the issue. But you can put the onus on the buyer by making that disclosure. We've got a neighbor that has been a nuisance in the past. That puts the onus on the buyer. And arguably the onus is already there on the buyer, but that shifts the burden unequivocally to the buyer to say, I need to figure out whether I can deal with that situation.
Yeah, and I got a quick question for everybody that's here. As buyer's agents, do you guys, like let's say a buyer likes 123 Easy Street, do you say, hey, are you going to come back tomorrow, maybe meet some of the neighbors and door knock? Do any of you suggest that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Del, I always make sure that they also come back at morning.
Wait, when?
At evening time to find
Yeah.
out who's coming home, and in the morning, if they're really serious about the property, and drive around and see if there's cars parked in the evening, or, kids around. It's
Yeah,
important.
because they could blow your deal, right? But would
But
you
it's
rather
better.
have it blown than?
Absolutely.
I want to bring up a different example.
Yeah, of course.
So I had this past month. Even when the law says you don't have to disclose, I'll recommend you disclose with permission from your seller. 3 phone calls in the past month about somebody listed a house and there was a murder in the house. Right? Law says it's not disclosable, you don't have to, all that stuff. The buyer is going to find out. 3 months, 6 months, 2 years down the road, the buyer is going, oh, you bought the Jones' house? Did you hear of that? Mrs. Jones blew his head. It's going to happen.
And one of those was mine.
Okay? You can't do it without permission from the seller. My suggestion strongly would be have the seller disclose it. Because I'll tell you what, if it's not an issue, then it's not an issue. But if it becomes an issue 6 months from now, even though the law is on your side,
No, and check this out.
And it's, you're still out there, you still have to defend
Right.
it, you still have to pay a lot of money. There's still no guarantees, even though you were right within the law. I still think just put it out there, and in our cases, 3 cases, it didn't make a difference.
No.
But at least you covered that one potential, open hole.
Yeah, and we see that with sex offender registries often. There was a rather famous case a couple years ago we weren't involved in. It was the Lerner case, the Lerner and Rowe law firm. They purchased a property in, I think it was Silverleaf. And there was a level 1 sex offender that lived in the immediate adjacent, I think it was next door. And that was the reason that the seller was selling the property, was that material. So in the case of a murder, it may or may not affect a buyer's decision to purchase a property. A level 1 sex offender next door, particularly if you have kids, probably does affect the buying decision. And the brokerage in that case was successful defending. When I say successful, they're ultimately able to get out of the lawsuit, but not without a tremendous cost. And that went all the way through the Court of Appeals. And so, you're stuck in a lawsuit and you're stuck paying a whole lot of money. Even if you've got insurance, you may just pay the first $10,000, whatever your deductible is, but your insurance is going to skyrocket after you get a claim like that, because that was a claim that would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend. Question?
Speaking of insurance, I presume that these cases are being defended pursuant to the E&O policies that we have, that when we broker transactions, we are assessed a fee for what is referred to as E&O coverage.
Right.
My question is, what is the extent of that coverage? And does, more specifically, does there have to be an actual transaction for that coverage to be applicable?
Transaction, no. Well, I guess it depends on how you define transaction. You could have a transaction that doesn't actually close escrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You could have an E&O covered claim out of a transaction that doesn't close escrow. A seller, for example, could file a lawsuit that says you did something to prevent the buyer from closing escrow. So yeah,
Does it have to get to escrow? Does
No.
it have to get that far?
No, and I'm speaking in generalities here because each E&O policy can be a little bit different, but ordinarily it's not going to be triggered by the extent in which a transaction progresses. You could represent a buyer and buyer asks you to write an offer and you don't do so in a timely fashion and somebody else buys the property. And so in that case, you didn't even write the offer. So we're not opening escrow, not getting anywhere. And you could be liable for the buyer's alleged damages, not getting that house. That would probably be covered under most E&O policies.
It would probably be covered.
Well, and the reason I say probably is because I'm an attorney and I can't say 100% certainty with anything. I can't tell you that.
Is it more likely
It's
that
sunny
nothing
today.
would be covered?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So Brian, to answer your question from my perspective, that's why every document for every sale is required. There's a meaning for every piece of paper. Half the paper is because the state requires it, and the other half is because it protects us on a claim. All the disclosures, it's only there, buyer advisory, wire scam, affiliate business disclosure, it's all there for just another layer of protection.
Question?
I think sometimes the way that the questions are worded can make it difficult too. Like for instance, it'll ask in the SPUDs, is there a pending lawsuit, on this, is there a pending lawsuit on this property? Well, if there was a lawsuit through the HOA that's been settled and we bring it up, sometimes it can be to where we are disclosing something that makes it difficult for us with our property and it had nothing to do with our property. You see what I'm saying?
But there again, I would always lean on the side of disclosure and just, in that case, if you don't think it actually affects that property itself because the lawsuit's been resolved, the HOA lawsuit, provide that explanation. And it's not going to be material to a buyer in all likelihood. But what you don't want to do is take the risk and assume it's not material to a buyer. Disclose, and provide the explanation of why it's not, of the status, and give the buyer everything the buyer needs to make that decision.
Has the potato throwing lawsuit been resolved?
Yeah,
How
that
did it turn out?
it's settled. So we don't. It didn't generate any law per se. The only time we get law that's reportable and is precedent and we could cite for future cases is when a lawsuit goes all the way through a jury trial, and then one party appeals, goes up to the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals issues its decision, and then the Court of Appeals decides to publish it. So if the Court of Appeals issues its decision but doesn't publish, then it's not precedential law. And so there are very, very few laws or cases that become precedent in Arizona on these disclosure issues. And that's why it's oftentimes just hypothetical. Now, we don't know whether you have to disclose a handicapped neighbor or the conduct that she does. What we do know is, in order to reduce your risk and the likelihood of being in a lawsuit, if the seller would have made that disclosure, or if the listing agent would have made that disclosure with the seller's consent, lawsuit never happens.
Does anybody have one more question? We have time for one more.
Just one more point. I think the one thing that Sandy's saying that I can't agree with more is on a stigmatized property. Even though we're not obligated to disclose certain things, so one of the biggest lawsuits that one of our agents that my old company was involved with was a triple murder case where our agent represented the buyer. It was not disclosed that there was a triple murder at this property. It was a very high profile, about 10 years previous. And within 30 days of closing, lawsuit.
Right.
And it was very drawn out. It settled. It was Boatman's relocation over Beltmansdale. Boatman's told the agent they wouldn't give them a listing if they disclosed it because they didn't disclose it. And I think Boatman's ended up paying about $50,000 or $60,000. And E&O did not participate in that, and luckily it was settled. Boatman's took care of it. But to think that just because you're going, hey, I don't have to disclose it, because
Right.
it says I don't have to disclose a stigmatized property, whether it's a supernatural event, suicide, or a murder.
Well, and let me put a finer point on that also from your potential exposure by not making that disclosure. So there's a statute that covers certain issues. If a prior occupant had HIV or AIDS, that doesn't legally have to be disclosed. But the law and the statute provide that you can't misrepresent that condition. So if, in the Lerner case, if the buyer said, hey, is there a sex offender living next door? If you said no, then that statute doesn't provide protection. And like I said before, people say and do all kinds of things in lawsuits. So if I'm a plaintiff and I find out that there's a sex offender next door, there was a triple murder in my house, something like that, and if it wasn't disclosed by statute, if I make the allegation that I verbally asked whether there was a murder or there's a sex offender next door, and I'm verbally told no, then that lawsuit's going all the way to trial. You're not getting out of that unless you pay a whole lot of money to settle. So I don't want you to create this misconception that the statute provides some sort of blanket protection about disclosure. It doesn't. If you're asked, you have to be truthful, and you could get in a situation where an unscrupulous plaintiff makes an allegation that there was a verbal discussion and a denial. And then you're stuck in a lawsuit.
And here's my thoughts, right? If the seller in that interview says that they don't want that disclosed, then they obviously feel that it's a material item, so it should be disclosed.
Right.
I mean, so if you really look at the opposite of that, why are they putting so much emphasis on you not disclosing it?
Right.
Because they know they'll be damaged, right? So why would you take an account like that would be my...
Well, you know what, and there's so many gray areas. Here's one, I get this phone call a lot. So who brought the HOA issue, right? So somebody goes, when's the last time anybody went to an HOA meeting? Right? Most of us don't go, right? At the meeting, the house is in escrow, the meeting is on Tuesday, and they talked about a possible assessment coming up to develop, the capital funds. Deal closes on Friday, but the seller never went to that meeting. Deal closes on Friday. The following Tuesday, a letter goes out and says they took a vote and they're going to be assessing. So the buyer's pissed because during the escrow, he said the seller didn't disclose that there's going to be, $1,000 assessment. Well, the seller really didn't know. Should he have known? Maybe, but did he know? No, he didn't go to the meeting. The formal letter didn't come out until after the fact. He just didn't know. And these are all we just try to resolve on our level, because if it gets past us, it just, all hell breaks loose.
We have that exact lawsuit.
Yeah.
It was just
Not ours,
filed
right?
a month ago. No, it was an HOA. It was an HOA special assessment. Optima, just north of Fashion Square Mall. Alleged they knew of but didn't disclose a special assessment. And right around the time of that transaction, the owner of Fashion Square Macerich submitted a pre-zoning application to go up to 150 feet north of Fashion Square on a mixed-use tower.
Right.
And this unit in Optima is south-facing on like the 10th floor. So they're suing for, you either knew or should have known about this proposed development that's going to affect our view of it.
It's just,
Wow.
When in doubt, spit it out.
If a seller asks you, do I need to disclose that there's substance abuse group home in the neighborhood?
I'm sorry, if you say it.
Substance abuse
Community home in the neighborhood, which is protected. But you're asked by the seller if they should disclose it.
does the seller really know, or is it?
Oh, yeah, no, they know.
Well, if they said it, they should then. I mean, if they say anything.
It's a tough
to
one. Talk to your
disclose it.
broker, talk to an attorney.
Well, I mean,
That's
it's
perfect
not
timing.
available, but because like Frank said, you're now dealing with the Disabilities Act, you're dealing with protected classes.
You cannot. The answer is you cannot.
Okay, so that's what I
Right.
answered, but they-
Can we have two more questions? Go ahead.
I had a question, like going back to the HOA and the flood zone, like we deal with a lot. Providing the documentation backing up that disclosure, is that out of our scope of work? Because I've had that argument, especially with flood zones. We provide the elevation certificate, but is that really our job?
You can be a conduit of information, so you can provide disclosures from one party to the other, but where we go outside of your scope is providing explanation of what it means, what the ramifications are. If a property is situated somewhat in a floodplain, how can that affect future development? That would go outside the scope of so you should provide the information and also provide it with a written disclaimer that they need to consult with a professional, a specialist to determine what.
With HOAs, we get like the documentation from the HOA explaining the lawsuit. So with the SPUDs, we send that over. Here is current status, or the disposition and all that.
Yeah, you've discharged your duties by providing that information, and then by also saying you need to consult with a professional about how this may affect you. But if you try to dissect that information yourself, that would create an issue.
I had a house closed 6 months ago, and this new buyer, I represented the buyer, called me and said that they had found out from the neighbors that the police had been called 30 times in the past year. On the seller, she had some teenage kids that I think probably were dealing drugs or something. I had no idea until he told me this. And he said, shouldn't that have been disclosed? And I said, well, if they were cooking meth in the house, that should be disclosed. But she's going to disclose that her kids are bad and the cops have been called 30 times?
Yeah, and I think that's probably one where the buyer would have a very difficult time trying to bring a claim based on that, because the SPUDs case that we talked about, that's going to be an issue that is ongoing during the buyer's occupancy and ownership. In our case, when the seller moves out, that nuisance is eliminated. So it's probably not something that would materially affect the value going forward. And in any event, that buyer is going to have a very difficult time arguing damages. In other words, how the seller's sons were delinquents, how does that affect the current value of the property? And they probably have a difficult time with that.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
This is totally unscripted. Shannon, did you read your email?
Yes.
Okay.
I just got it.
So we had an arbitration or an ethics complaint filed against Shannon that was just dismissed. So it just came in just now.
Just so you know, it's
well
one
done.
word, that's why I got dismissed. Easy there.
But she kept her notes and she kept her timeline, so
What's that?
so it's done. Thank
Yes, I
you.
know.
Okay.
All right, so hey, the way I would answer that question, I would say you're not legally bound to disclose. If I was you, I would disclose it.
I was under the impression that you couldn't, that if you did, that you're breaking some rule.
I would say you're not legally
You're
bound.
not breaking.
If I was you, I would disclose it. Now, from a buyer's advisory standpoint, that is, I don't know if that website's on there about neighboring. I know the sex offender website's on there. Police websites are on there. But as a buyer representative, you want to make sure that they're looking and reading that buyer's advisory for your protection. All right, Keith?
So this is findprop.com, is our new home junction site, and this is a few things that all the agents should be going onto the site to take a quick look at. So go up to our offices and then which office you're at. So I'm going to go to Pima and then view the agents. So this is going to show all the agent profiles on here. So there's a couple of things to note, like the social medias. You can't enter the information on here yourself. So what you'll need to do is email that to me. I'm going to send out an email to everyone that has a list of all the things that you need to submit, your social media, your contact information, your headshot, everything that's involved. But this is how these social media links show up on your profile. And then you're going to want to click on your name as well. And there's a couple of things of interest here. So we do have a bio section on here now. So all of this text, so if you have something that's already written or you want to write it, that's going to be under the bio section to submit that information. Then your general contact information will be on here, including your website. And we also have testimonials that are on here. You can do these a couple different ways. So down here at the bottom, you can just fill out the testimonials. So in a case where you may have like Zillow reviews, you can go onto Zillow and enter this information yourself as the client, put in the client name, and just paste their review into here for that. Or you can send them a link to this page to have them fill it out for you. When you fill that out, it's not going to appear instantly. It does go through a review process, so we'll go to us at the office. Once that's approved, it will show up on your profile. So what we're looking at here is Erica's profile, and all of her testimonials show up on here. So it is really important that you fill out that information. The more that we have on here, the more that you'll get out of it. So just take some time and fill it out. Also on there, we'll put the information about purchasing your own. They are a $200 one-time startup fee and then $30 a month if you want to get the sites. The form will be attached and all the stuff you need to do. It doesn't go through the office, that's directly through Home Junction, so you fill out the information and work directly with them on that.
I'm
Yes.
confused about what you just said. Purchasing what?
Your own individual website.
Oh, okay.
So your
Individual
own, right,
website.
not this is the company's website, that'd be your own individual website.
Okay, thank
And
you.
remember, with your annual dues, you still get this single page website from RE/MAX International too. So you can always use that, and you can link the two together as well. And Keith will be able to give you more information if you ask. Yeah, they're fully customizable. This one is a really nice editor for being able to update your information, put photos, videos, and really aligning and setting up the pages the way that you want. We will be doing some training classes on that. But we've been pleased with the look, the feedback, the response, and everything on it. So, just please go to
Which the first class will be this Thursday after business planning at Fidelity Campus.
One of the main reasons that we did change to a new website is that we continue to have complaints about Blue Roof. That you would get in there, you would be editing the page, you would get ready to save it, and it would completely wipe everything out, and you have to start from the very beginning. So we tried to find, Keith actually did a lot of homework on this and asked a lot of people on their thoughts. He played around with it. He actually did a lot of back-end stuff with it before we even did it. He probably did 5 different websites that he worked on the back side of it just to see what the ease of as an agent plus as an IT person. So he tried to find the one that was the, aesthetically pleasing, but it was also easy for the agent to go in there and do the work for themselves. So this was the one that we came up with, and we're very happy with everything that we've seen so far with this company.
One of the things I like on here too is you can set up these area sections. So it's going to show you the demographics on what's going on, the listings that are on there, the areas specifically. And it just kind of auto-generates all this information for you. So if you're farming out a specific area or you're doing subdivisions or neighborhoods, you can specify these for your site to inform which specific areas you're doing for your own marketing.
Does anybody have a question for Keith right now, or?
Keith, what was the price on this versus Blue Roof?
It's a $200 initial startup fee, and then it's $30 a month.
So it's $10 more a month compared to Blue Roof. but there is that initial setup fee. But after that, it's just $10. And if you wanted to stay with Blue Roof, that they'll start doing that. And you can keep it, and I think it's $50 a month, is that right? Yes. So the discount that for the 20 was actually through the company itself. We were subsidizing that. So anything else, it'll be $50 a month if you want to keep the Blue Roof. All
So
right?
actually, you're almost forced to switch over because the other one is less expensive.
It's actually better, and it really is. I mean, this one right here is going to give you a lot more that you can do with it compared to the Blue Roof.
Do you like Blue Roof, Linda?
We don't use it.
I mean, we don't really use it that much, but we have it and we keep it updated with, some blogs and stuff, but
Yeah, I hate to
it
use
doesn't
the
get
term
used very
force.
often.
Yeah, so come see me. We think this is a better product, but come see me.
Just a quick, my son's been building our website, Linda, and went to WordPress and went to Wix, et cetera. As soon as this came out, he just said it's the best thing. It's an awesome site, and we've been using Blue Roof, and it's terrible. The back end's awful. You can't do it.
Yeah, the back end is awful.
It is.
Yeah.
So he said this is an incredible site. So Keith, kudos to you for doing your homework on it. Thank you.
Yeah, and anybody else that has that, because, I don't like that. We just think that this is a much better direction. And if you're short-term damaged financially, come see me. Yeah.
Well, I think the best question is, does whatever
Home Junction.
Home Junction, thank you, offer the service to transfer all your data for you? Because that's one thing when you're switching over websites. It's a huge issue when I have to transfer 20 years worth of data over to a new website. Is that something they offer? And what's the cost?
Generally they wouldn't. I mean, they will do stuff on an individual basis, so if you want to do stuff, they're highly skilled at doing that, but it's a little expensive to have the custom work done. A lot of that, though, one of the things is they do work at more of a technology, more of an advanced level, where things like an automated blog, they do have some of that stuff, but they don't want to just have you copy information over from another section. So a lot of sites you'll get Superlative, you get the templates and stuff like that. They don't have all the pre-written text about for buyers and sellers and all this stuff, because when Google looks at that information, it automatically recognizes there's 1,000 copies of this. It disregards all that information. So you do want to kind of have custom information. You can copy sections out of another site if it's more verbiage and stuff.
All of our stuff's pre-built over
Right, so
35
that's one of the
years.
reasons why my superlative, I run 7 websites. One of them is superlative, I'll never change it. 2 years old, not gonna change it, so, but I'll run this one in addition to that. So, part of the expense is to be a player digitally. It gets expensive, so you might want to run or consider running multiple websites.
All right, thank you. So we're going to switch things up a little bit with our vendors, and I apologize to them already. We're running a little bit short on time today, so we have Get Your Move On wasn't able to show up today. We have Mary with Fidelity, National Home Warranty, Jill Bright with Chicago Title. We have Sharon with AJF. Azane wasn't able to hear, neither was Home Point. We have Julie LaRaza with Stewart. We have we have Christy Ryan. No. Tiffany with CNN isn't here, but Bethany was here. I'm not sure if she got up.
She had to run out, interest points jumped a 0.25% today.
Yeah. So we have Ben Tobias with Bias Group, and we have Julie Walker. We have Jen Weller and Jason and Troy, correct?
Yep.
All right, good. Thank you so much. Dylan.
Yeah, I
closing point.
don't have much other than opening up for any questions you guys might have or anything that you're experiencing on lead generation, lead follow-up, negotiating, or presenting. Yeah.
I have a question for Sharon. How much do you guys charge to send an inspector out for a buyer's walkthrough?
For a reach.
Good question. We don't do walkthroughs.
Okay, because I was wondering when you brought that up.
Okay, so it's called a post-inspection.
Yeah.
So they're just going out there to see if the buyer, if the seller did what they were supposed to do, and I recommend that for everybody.
Right, but do you do
Re-inspect.
You do re-inspection. Okay.
Inspections of items that they requested for repair, but we don't do a walkthrough where you're determining if the house, it could include cosmetic issues,
Right.
or what in your negotiations they were going to be
behind and things like that.
How much do you charge for that?
It depends on the number of items that were re-inspected.
Okay.
Big difference between a house that has 10 or 15 versus one that has 50.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. So when somebody's not available for a walkthrough, ask them, sister, brother, uncle, cousin, you can't do it. Okay, so you can sign it. Any other questions on lead generation, lead follow-up, negotiating, or presenting?
You gonna supply us with a DNC now?
Do not call this. I am not, but there might be a disclaimer coming out by Pam Bay. That's a pretty hefty lawsuit.
Yeah.
But I will be working on some scripts that are more survey oriented, where like kind of what I shared with you guys, that you could open up and say, hey, Del Rounds and 3 Max Fine Properties, I'm just running a quick survey on a scale of 8 to 10, your last listing agent, how would you rate them? I'll work on that. That is a survey, and if you did keep, well, I'm always in the gray, right? That affects me a lot, but, right, your cheese is always being moved. If you don't want to call, then what is your door knocking skills, right? If you, and I'm looking, good story, right? How many times we door knocked?
4.
4 times, and how much money we made those 4 times?
A lot.
How much?
I don't remember.
I think it's north of 50,000.
Yeah, but you were there.
Yeah.
He
So-
was the key.
So we door knocked 4 times, and we've made
Yeah.
north of $50,000. So, but I'm door knocking hot leads. What are hot leads for me? Something that just came off the
I'll
market.
door knock with you anytime.
Something that just came off the market on an
But he has to
expired,
go with me.
canceled, or FSBO. For me, that's why I'm a firm believer, go into your zip code of where you live now. Do a reverse drip campaign of any expired that comes up in your neighborhood, and you should be there by 9 in the morning. And saying, hey, I'm a micro expert, I live right down the street, can I get on your interview list? I mean, it can be that simple, but you don't have to do that. But you better know something for lead generation, because it's the only secret sauce. Then all you have to do is lead follow-up, then you can get into negotiating and presenting. And lead follow-up is just giving them additional information. The house down the street sold. Interest rates went up. Informational calls. Michigan State just came out with their consumer confidence index. It went up 1/8%, right? Just little things. That's lead follow-up. You don't have to say, when are we putting your house on the market? You say, hey, did you know, right? Okay. Then you can get into negotiating and presenting. But unless you do the first 2, you're never going to get to the second 2. You got to have that top sector figured out on whatever your forte is to meet as many people as possible, and then lead follow-up.
So come to Camp Advantage for lead generation, right? Camp Advantage is open to everybody, it's not for newcomers, we discuss what's in your world. And the reason I bring it up is, I'll just make it short. Frankie comes to lead Camp Advantage every week, and we just got to be talking about what's going on in her world. And we sold a house that was never on the market because she mentioned something at Camp Advantage. So
The energy's there, yeah.
it's just there. So Camp Advantage is more than just learning, but I'm telling you, we sold a house, we're in escrow, we're gonna close in a month.
Yeah, so Camp Advantage is every Wednesday at 9:30 in our building. Business planning is 10 a.m. at the Fidelity campus, and then after that, we usually have some type of jump start. Last week it was about Zillow reviews, and there was about 4 people in the class that didn't know how to do
And
that.
setting up, just basically doing a MLS search for your sellers, letting them know what's coming up in their neighborhood, what's selling, what the prices are. So you can do that as well for not just your buyers, but for your sellers. And so that's one of the things that we talked about last week during that program.
No, and
Yeah, sorry.
Can you do that for the classes?
This one right here is going to be this Thursday.
No, these camera.
Oh, the camera?
Oh, sure.
So like,
Can we stream
this?
the? Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, done. Always easy. But I wanted to share one more thing. So there's 3 things that we try to get for the Rounds team: a Zillow review, a Google review, and a Yelp review. Then the Yelp reviews are hard to get. But here's something that I found out, right? I didn't have a Google business page. Yeah, what the hell? Right? So I found out that business plan, the reason why I'm not getting any Google reviews is I don't have a Google business page. And I'm like, what the beep, beep, beep? You know, I'm yelling. But guys, I learn in these, and I learn from you guys. So it's a never-ending circle. So anyway, come to them. They're offered. You don't have to come, but we'd love to see you.
Paul Baker has a brief something.
A brief something.
A brief
something.
Sorry, let me say what it was. Sorry.
So yesterday we had our wrap-up meeting from the Hutch event last week, and thank you so much to the agents and our marketing partners that showed up. We sold out the event. We met our goal with sponsorship. The end result was we netted $12,500 to help our family. So it was a great event. The designated broker of Russ Lyon wrote a $750 check, but he's nothing. Our man here, Dell, donated well over $1,000 to the cause.
All right, right after this.
One more quick thing. Sorry.
Okay, Sandy.
Yeah. Unofficially, but officially, I am now the co-chair of the Hutch Fund.
Oh! That means it's going to cost you all money.
It's a good cause. She was not. I see her in the corner now.
We have one of our new agents showed up just a little bit late. So Franco Din, she just joined us about 3 weeks ago. Is that right?
Yeah.
So stand up, give us a little bit about yourself.
I am coming from San Diego. I was in the industry then, and back here. I grew up here, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Following this meeting right now, so in about 5 minutes, right in the back right-hand corner, Shannon Quigliotta is going to be talking to you about a new product that she's going to be working on. It's called Open to Close. If you're interested, she's just going to give you a taste, minutes, and then Frank Fernelli is also going to give us 15 minutes next month as well about eBroker Match. That right there is going to be a great product for everybody. I mean, both products are really good. One of the things about Frank, and I'll just say real quick, if you are looking for a referral or you need someone to send out a referral, Frank's the one that can actually hook you up. He actually follows it all the way to the end of close to make sure that you get paid. Most of the referrals that you give out, usually forget about. Frank's not going to let that happen. He's going to make sure that if you give out a referral, you're going to get paid. So, anybody have any questions? Great, go get them.